Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Have a new offering from CRKT today. Now this is a collaboration with designer Brian Tigh, who I happen to really like, and I will say this, if I was going to buy a custom, it would likely be a Brian Tigh custom. He's got a few models that I really like, including this one, the custom Tigh Tac. I also like the Tigh Fighter and a few others. Anyway, Tycoon for sure as well. Now let's get back to our main discussion here. This is not the only Brian Tigh collab for this year. The Spyderco Tie Stick is also out, and I gotta tell you, I'm not a fan of that knife at all. Also, this is the second iteration of the Tigh Tac, so Tigh Tac 2, okay? And that's because, and if you, I'll roll in a picture here in a second of the Tigh Tac 1, and I do think this is a big improvement on that, okay? Fairly well done knife in general. I like the way, and let me say one more thing by way of introduction. This is also available in a drop point, but I specifically waited. The drop point's actually been out for a little longer, maybe a month or so, but I waited until the Tanto was available at retailers to pick one up because, number one, I feel like this blade shape fits the aesthetics of the handle with the angles and sort of the lightning strike pattern. I also am, I just find it more sort of compelling with this blade shape over the other. So I'll speak more to that when we kind of get through into the handle design and stuff like that. So there you go, that's my introduction. This is the Tigh Tac 2 in the Tanto with a compound grind. So let's go ahead and get into size and weight, which is normally what we do first. This knife doesn't quite make 8 inches, okay? It's 7 15/16. The blade is 3 3/8 inches, and the handle is 4 9/16 inches. I wanted to say just 9/16, and that wouldn't have made any sense, but 4 9/16, so just over 4.5 inches. All right, that's where that extra 16th comes from in the overall measurement. The weight on this is actually really good, okay? For its size, pretty good weight, 9.4, I don't know what it is with me and nines today. Anyway, let's try 3.4 ounces. 3.4 ounces. Can you imagine a knife this big that was 9 ounces? You guys would be like, Kevin, that's horrible. So 3.4 ounces on this, and that I will say is a very good number. It's really lightweight, carries extremely well. Now, what have we got for comparisons? We've got a few here. First up, because it's actually almost the exact same size, I pulled out the SOG Flash 2. Now, I will say this, when it comes to, budget-friendly knives that deploy quickly and, are comfortable to carry, this is definitely a good one, but I've rarely ever seen a SOG with this horrible lock that didn't have blade play. This, on the other hand, does not have blade play. So if you're looking at a SOG Flash 2, I would lean heavily toward the Tigh Tac 2. It's just overall a better constructed knife. But I know the Flash 2 is very well known and very popular, so that's how they compare in terms of size. Got a couple others here for you. An even more popular knife, of course, is the Rat Model 1. There they are together, so you can see the Rat 1 is bigger. This is more like the size of knife I like to carry. What else have we got? Oh yeah, when it comes to budget blades, it's hard to do better than real steel. There's the T101 Thor. You can see it's a little bigger than the Tigh Tac. All right. And finally, I have a new Kershaw that I thought I'd throw in here just to kind of, indicate this review will be coming up sometime in the not too distant future. And it is obviously quite a bit bigger than the Tigh Tac, but those are a couple of, if you're looking at the new knives for 2016, that gives you a little bit of a comparison there. So there you go. Those are the comparisons. That's the size. In terms of how this knife carries, it does carry really well. It's very lightweight. It's very comfortable in pocket. And for a lot of people who, are not as insistent as I am on a larger knife, this knife, I will say, overall is too small for me. Okay, especially with the size to weight ratio they've got. If they had gone to 9 inches, an 8 and 15/16 inch knife, you'd still be only close to 4 ounces, and that would be totally amazing. So that's where we're going to stop with size and weight and comparisons. Let's zoom in and deal with the specifics, beginning with the blade. All right, for some reason the camera doesn't want to listen here. There we go. Okay, so there it is in a close-up, and this is a knife that I think does where the close-up definitely is needed. You can see that really cool compound grind. You can see the lines in the GRN handle material. That's just glass reinforced nylon, okay? So like FRN or a number of other materials that you'll see in budget knives and even not so budget knives. You can see, you know, this very nice Tanto. I love the grind lines on this. I will say this is a knife that's extremely photogenic. You know, one of the things that, whatever you want to say about Brian Tigh's designs, they're always compelling, okay? Now, as I said, the tie stick I think is a total fail that's out this year as well, but this is actually a really well done knife. And what's cool about this, I think, is that, you know, if you're a guy who wants a knife that's cool, that's a little bit different, but doesn't want to spend a huge amount of money, you can pick up something like this, and it looks like a really cool knife. It's fairly well done. Yeah, it's budget materials, 8CR13 and GRN handle, but you know, those materials are finished fairly well. So let's get into the specifics on this blade. Sorry about that. I was just kind of giving you guys a little chance to look over this knife in detail. So Tanto blade shape, 8CR13 MOV steel, which is, you know, a good budget steel, and that's about what you can say for it. You will have to, you know, if this is going to be your daily carry, yeah, you can expect to sharpen it somewhat regularly. The Tanto blade shape, I don't think is very difficult to sharpen, but I know some people have complained a little about it. Let me say that the compound grind is kind of backwards for a user, okay? This is common in what are like tactical blades, okay? Because the idea is you reduce the amount of steel out near the tips so that slashing and stabbing is better. For a user knife, it's actually nice to have more material out here near the tip so it's more robust and durable, and then have the very thin grind back here where you're going to be doing those kind of fine, kind of cutting, whittling tasks. This is kind of the opposite of that, but both of these parts of the blade, and I've done actually quite a bit of cutting with this, both parts of the blade cut just fine, and that's largely because the edge geometry is actually fairly well done, okay? A couple little hiccups on this blade as you're looking here. Notice on this side, as the grind line comes down right here, it kind of peters out a little bit and then kind of restarts. So that's not perfect. It just meant that when they ground this, it wasn't perfectly square to the grinding wheel or grinding belt, whatever they were using. Okay, but overall, really well done. And I've used this quite a bit, and I have no complaints from a user standpoint, okay? And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty important. It's like, okay, the blade looks really awesome, and I will say this, I think this blade looks amazing. But how does it cut? And it actually cuts quite well, okay? I have found that if you want to, you can kind of choke up, and there is room for a finger right there on the front side of the flipper, and that does allow you a little more control, although most times I found myself just using the knife like this. Okay, if this was larger, this might be more helpful. So that's the blade. All right, as I said, it is available in a drop point, and the drop point is going to be a little more utilitarian. But I don't think the drop point suits this design very well. I think with the angles and with the lines here, the Tanto really goes together with the overall aesthetic of the knife, where the drop point seems to lose something. All right, so that's the blade. Cuts well, looks really awesome. And this is a knife that you'll often, at least I did when I pulled it out to use it, I definitely got some comments on it. So, moving on to lockup and deployment. And I'll stay zoomed in since this is a knife that looks pretty cool. Let's just stay zoomed in. You can see the decorative pivot there. It is a button lock, okay, and it has both the flipper and the thumb studs, both of which actually work really well. So there you go. And mostly this is a function of the geometry. The flipper functions exceptionally well. The detent is just right so that if you put a little thumb pressure on that, you can see it flips out very quickly. Not assisted at all, but just as fast as any assisted knife you're going to get. It's actually in terms of how the deployment is pulled off, it's really, really good. Okay, so notice guys that this is a budget knife, but I've been saying really, really good a lot. So for your, whatever this costs, maybe 40 bucks, 35 bucks, I feel like you're getting a pretty well-made knife. And that's, I know I may be a little bit biased because I do tend to like Brian Tigh designs. Let me say this, no blade play at all, okay, in any direction. And this is true of my knife. I've had 3 or 4 CRKT button locks, and I think one other one had very, very little blade play. Or yeah, anyway, let's put it this way. In my experience with CRKT button locks, because a button lock requires a fairly high degree of precision in order to be done right, you may get some blade play. So if you're going to buy this knife, I would not hesitate to buy it. I think it's a great knife, but it would help to buy it from a place where you could pull them off, you know, where you could check out a couple and pick the one that has no blade play. Maybe none of them have blade play, and that's really, really awesome. This one doesn't, but I don't think, my experience with CRKT and their other Brian Tigh collabs with button locks is that some of them have had blade play. Okay, so I'm just going to throw that out there as, you know, a fair warning. I've never had any of them that were really, really bad. So for example, you guys have heard me talk about the SOGs before. With this, you know, fake arc lock, the blade play, I've honestly never seen a SOG with this lock that didn't have pretty bad blade play. This, I have seen blade play from these CRKT button locks, but only minor blade play, and it's never been the kind of blade play that I would say I can't use the knife or I have to get rid of it or anything like that. It's always been very, very minor. All right, so there you go. That's lockup and deployment. Very good, very fast, very smooth. Okay, actually really, really impressed with how that part of the design is done. Okay, a real achievement as far as I'm concerned. There you go, one more time. Now, let's move on to the handle. And again, guys, I've got to say I'm really impressed. One of the things that's cool is they've kept the weight down. I'm going to see if I can show you. You should be, yeah, there you go. You can see the stainless steel in there. Okay, notice how it's only in the back. So if you look at the handle here, sort of follow this line across and up here. This is the only place where there's stainless steel. So it's only in the back of the handle. So it's kind of like, instead of milling it out, they just went with a thin strip to support the screws and the locking mechanism, and then left the rest totally GRN, which does lighten up the knife a lot. And again, I can't really complain about it. It's really, really well done. I have no issue at all with how this knife is. In hand, it does not feel cheap. It does not feel flexible. Okay, just extremely well done. Now, I do have one wish, and I know they would have charged more for it, but this knife would have looked amazing if all of these lines, notice how it's got the typical Brian Tigh groove pattern. A lot of his blades are actually ground with these grooves as well. But this has the Brian Tigh groove pattern, which looks really awesome. But just imagine this with me. Can you imagine what this knife would have looked like if this was layered G10? So as you made those grooves, you would see the different colors come out. That would have been, in my mind, totally amazing. So again, CRKT, if you're watching this, if you make a Tigh Tac 2 in a large, it would be really cool if you did layered G10 and a knife that was closer to 9 inches in length. That would be like a dream knife. If you want, upgrade the steel, that wouldn't hurt either. So let's get back to what we're talking about now. And that kind of, that little phrase, guys, that gives you an overview of my main issues with this knife. And you notice they're mostly opinion issues. It's not that there's nothing on here that doesn't function the way that it should. Okay, moving on to the pocket clip. It is a bent over deep carry clip, and again, it works really well. Now there are 3 screws in here. Notice, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. I'm not sure why there are 3 screws. That's not something you see very often, but they are nicely recessed, and I've got to give credit where credit is due. I love the way they've done the pocket clip on this. It functions really well, but also they have milled out the GRN so that the pocket clip sits flush. See there? See how the bottom of the clip, let me see if I can find another knife that doesn't do this. Yeah. So see how on this Kershaw, it's just flat and they've just screwed it on, okay? That's fine and it totally works, but this adds just a step of, this just adds a little bit of extra perfection to it. A little bit of a cleaner look and feel. Okay, the clip does work really, really well. Lanyard hole is quite small. You probably wouldn't get 550 cord through there. If you did, it would be a real struggle to get that to happen for you. In terms of the ergonomics, it's good. Okay, this little flipper tab can dig in just a little bit on prolonged cutting, but then you can back off a little and it goes away. The front here, this again is one of those things where it can create a bit of a hot spot. Notice how 2 fingers don't quite fit, and if I put my 3 fingers back here, you end up with this big gap. So this, in order to pull off this design, there's this little step down, and it's not perfect, but I really can't complain about it. As I said, I did quite a bit of cutting with this for testing purposes, and I wasn't saying to myself, oh man, this is so uncomfortable and this is a pain in the neck. It's just one of those things that, you know, could be a little uncomfortable, especially if your hands are a slightly different shape than mine. That's one of those things that's hard to gauge, right? The next person could grab this knife and feel like it's absolutely perfect because all of their fingers fit up just right into all the little spaces. Okay, so there you go, guys. Let's back out. And the main thing that I want to emphasize here is notice that as I went through this knife, there's really nothing that I can point to that is a fail. Okay, the design overall looks really cool. I did point out a little bit of an issue with the grind here, but it's not something that has affected me using the knife in any way, or affected me using the knife in any way. There's one little issue that I forgot to mention, but I did notice upon initial inspection. The T is missing from Tigh Tac on my particular knife. I'm not sure if that's true on all of them, but certainly on this one there's 1 letter short, so it just says I-Tac, I guess. Now, there are a lot of knives in this price range. There are a lot of knives in this kind of material, and you know, essentially you've got a fairly lightweight budget EDC. You know, is this better than every other offering? Better than the Tenacious? Better than the Flash? Better than the Rat 1? Better than the Utilitac? And even a bunch of other CRKTs. It's not necessarily better. It is well done, okay? The fit and finish, the overall design on this, I think is really, really, they've done a great job with it. And so if you like this design and if you want to carry something different, okay, the reality is, yeah, this is a good knife, but it's a pretty plain Jane sort of standard looking full flat ground knife. All right, if you want something that's a little different, that is maybe a little more unique to you and to your style, I think this is a great option. Okay, it is a little cheaper than the Rat 1, by the way, but you know, let's say this is probably more comparable in size to a Rat 2. And yeah, is it better than the Rat 2 in every way? I wouldn't say better necessarily, but certainly the looks are very compelling. The overall design is really, really cool. And the only drawback that I can really see to this knife is not one that pertains to quality or construction or anything like that. It's just the size. I wish this were a little bit bigger. And it wouldn't even have to be a lot. Half an inch bigger would make a real difference to me. And in a perfect world, this would be, you know, 8 15/16 instead of 7 15/16. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll talk to you soon.